I spent 15 years pretending to be ordinary. Not poor, not extravagant. Just forgettable. That was the safest category a woman like me could live in. My husband, Thomas Mercer, left behind a great deal when he died. A son, a legacy, and a secret so large it could swallow the world that touched it. I chose to bury that secret beneath silence, because silence is safer than truth. And today, on the morning of my son's wedding, that silence was beginning to fracture. Dylan stood in front of the mirror in his childhood bedroom, fixing his tie with shaking hands. The fabric wouldn't sit straight. He kept tightening, loosening, tightening again. "You're choking yourself," I told him gently. He laughed under his breath. "I feel like I'm supposed to be someone impressive today." "You already are," I said. He didn't look like a man marrying into wealth. His suit was tailored, yes, but not expensive. His shoes were polished, but not designer. He carried himself like someone raised around honesty, not status. That was intentional. He believed we lived on Thomas's pension, plus my small salary as a consultant. And he believed it because I made sure the world looked at us and saw nothing exceptional. But now, as the Westbrook limousine waited outside to take us to their estate, I felt the first tremor of risk. Weddings bind families, and families ask questions. "Mom," Dylan said, "you're nervous." "I'm relieved," he lied. "It's finally here." He nodded, distracted, as if trying to convince himself this future was truly his. The Westbrook estate wasn't the fantasy I imagined. It was worse. Not ostentatious, controlled, strategically tasteful. Stone architecture, trimmed lawns, unmarked gates. Money that didn't show off because it didn't have to. A man like Charles Westbrook didn't need chandeliers. Power was his decoration. When Dylan and I stepped from the car, Charles met us personally. Tall, silver-haired, posture sharp. He looked like a man who remembered the weight of every decision he had ever made. He extended a hand to Dylan, then to me, eyes assessing, not admiring. "Mrs. Mercer," he said. "Finally. We've heard so much." He was polite, but not warm. Charles didn't see a woman marrying her son into his family. He saw a possible liability. Inside the house, staff moved silently. No chaos, no celebration. Everything efficient. Everything observed. This, I realized, was not a wedding. It was a transaction. When Isabella finally entered the room, Dylan forgot to breathe. He loved her, truly loved her. She kissed his cheek, whispered something only he could hear, and smiled toward me. With practiced charm. But charm, in the wealthy, often hides the same hunger the poor have. The hunger to be safe. "Can I speak to you privately?" Isabella asked me, voice smooth. Of course she would ask. A mother standing against a billionaire family without a background check? Impossible. She led me to a quiet upstairs study. Away from crowds, away from the wedding coordinator, away from Dylan. The door closed with a soft click. For a long moment she said nothing. Just studied me. "You've kept to yourself," she began. "We tried to learn more about you, but information was limited." I kept my face neutral. That tends to happen when one lives quietly. Isabella raised a brow. Quietly or secretly? Her tone wasn't childish. It was professional, calculated, and too familiar. "You understand why we had to check," she continued. "Marriage merges financial futures. We needed to know what Dylan is walking into." There it was. Not love, due diligence. "And are you satisfied?" I asked. "No." The honesty surprised me. "There are traces," she said softly. "Old corporate registrations. Small holdings dissolved years ago. A consulting firm tied to your maiden name. Nothing wrong, but nothing explained." My pulse slowed. She did her homework. "You worry I'm hiding debt?" I asked. "I worry you're hiding wealth," she replied. "Real wealth doesn't leave fingerprints." I said nothing, because silence reveals less than denial. Isabella folded her arms. "Dylan believes you live modestly, but people don't fall off record that completely, unless they learned how." There it was, the danger. She wasn't spoiled. She was observant, trained, raised for power. "Tell me who you were," she whispered, "before you chose to be invisible." My throat tightened. If I spoke truth, Dylan's life would change forever. If I lied, Isabella would keep digging. Either direction carried cost. And that was when the house trembled with noise. Not music, not guests, but footsteps running down the hallway. A knocking rattled the door. A staff member breathlessly entered. "Miss Westbrook, Charles needs you downstairs. It's urgent." Isabella stiffened. "What happened?" The woman swallowed. "There's been a leak. Financial media just connected Evelyn Mercer to a dormant patent trust. Reporters are gathering outside the gate." Isabella turned slowly toward me. Her suspicion transformed into certainty. "You're not who you pretended to be," she whispered. And for the first time in 15 years, I had no lie prepared. Outside the window, through the empty spaces between trees, I saw headlights gathering near the estate entrance. News vans, cameras, journalists, coming for a woman who was supposed to be invisible. Everything I buried was rising. And the wedding hadn't even begun. The reception felt louder than the ceremony, though the music hadn't changed. Glasses chimed, waiters circled with trays, and laughter floated off marble walls like echoes inside a cathedral. But beneath the noise lived something quieter, attention. Every Westbrook I studied Dylan, measuring his worth, calculating his future value. And occasionally, those eyes drifted to me. I took a seat near the edge of the room, away from the dancing and speeches, needing space to breathe. My son's hand had shaken slightly when he placed the wedding ring on Isabella's finger. Love makes hands tremble. Uncertainty makes them colder. Isabella hadn't approached me since the ceremony ended. She and Dylan were pulled into waves of congratulations, photos, relatives, champagne toasts. But the thing she carried, the folded document, had not left her grip. It was tucked beneath her bouquet now, wrapped tightly in her fingers like something dangerous she didn't want to drop in front of witnesses. Charles Westbrook remained near me long enough to make his intentions clear. He stood with his hands folded behind his back, posture aristocratic, voice threaded, with politeness sharp and thin. "You didn't answer my question earlier," he said. I glanced up, sipping water instead of wine. "There wasn't a question." "There was," he replied easily. "Why hide your name on the RSVP?" "It wasn't intentional." He smiled politely, too politely. "You're a woman who doesn't do things by accident." That sentence landed more accurately than I liked. He studied me. Not flirtation. Not curiosity. Something closer to suspicion wrapped in velvet. "How long have you lived in the city?" he asked. 15 years. "What did you do before that?" "Worked. Raised a child." "What kind of work?" I smiled faintly. "Legal bookkeeping." He hummed as if filing that away. "Where?" "It was a small firm. It closed." "Names?" "I don't remember every detail from 15 years ago." That made him lean in slightly. "You seem like someone who remembers everything." Inside, I felt the truth shifting again. This wasn't small talk. It was reconnaissance. Before I could respond, Dylan arrived beside me and dropped into the seat, cheeks flushed from the attention, eyes bright, hopeful and exhausted. "Please tell me we can go home soon," he whispered. I smiled. "You're married. Home is with her now." His smile faded a little. "I know. I just want quiet." And then Isabella appeared behind him. Her voice was soft, controlled. "Mr. Westbrook," she said to her father. "Can I speak with Evelyn alone?" Charles looked at her for a long moment, then at me. Something unspoken passed between us, warning maybe, and he stepped away, drifting into a circle of senators and financiers in tailored tuxedos. Dylan hesitated. "Should I stay?" Isabella shook her head. "Give us a moment." Dylan kissed my hair, squeezed my shoulder, and moved toward the dance floor. Turned twice to look back at us. Then she sat beside me, back straight, voice low. "You're not what you appear to be," she said, eyes on the dancers. "Neither accusation nor compliment, just fact." "And what do I appear to be?" I asked quietly. "Ordinary," she said. "Too ordinary." I didn't react. She uncurled her fingers slowly, revealing the folded document. "Not dramatic. Deliberate. I found this in Dylan's coat pocket yesterday morning," she said. My throat went tight. It was an outdated certificate, nothing explosive, just a name change filing from 15 years ago. My name, my signature, proof of who I was before I became who I am, the life I erased. She spread the paper flat between us. It took me 2 hours to confirm this with public records, she whispered. 2 hours. That means anybody determined enough could have done the same. Her voice trembled, not with anger, with fear. Why did you change your name? I didn't answer immediately, because the honest answer was tangled in graves and memories, because I had vowed Dylan would never carry that past on his shoulders. I finally exhaled. The name I had before belonged to somebody I couldn't remain, I said. Isabella studied my face silently. Is Dylan in danger because of your past? No, I said. Are you sure? I met her gaze. Yes. She nodded once, then folded the paper again, precise, neat, emotion held by threads. I'm not trying to intimidate you, she said softly. I just need to know the man I married isn't built on a lie. Her honesty surprised me. There was no performance in her voice, only a young woman terrified of losing a future she had barely stepped into. And suddenly, I felt the ache of my son's truth. He hadn't married a monster. He had married someone trying to love him without blindfolds. I understand, I told her. But before she could respond, a waiter leaned down and whispered to her. Her expression froze. She stood abruptly. Dylan's looking for you, she said. Something's happened. My breath stalled. What happened? Isabella swallowed. He needs you right now, she whispered. It's about your past. From across the room, I saw Dylan staring at a wedding guest's phone, face white, body rigid, while guests whispered around him. Then he lifted his eyes toward me, and in front of everyone, my son mouthed a single word. Why? Everything slowed. Because I knew exactly what he must have found. And it was the one part of my history I never wanted him to read first.
Dylan stood frozen near the center of the reception hall, surrounded by murmurs and glittering chandeliers. The phone he held trembled visibly. Guests pretended not to stare, but the curiosity was magnetic. A man mid-wedding stiffened like he'd been struck. I walked toward him slowly, conscious of every step, every eye. The music played on. Violins sliding through a romantic melody that didn't belong to the moment. When I reached him, he didn't hand me the phone. He just whispered, voice barely holding its shape. Why didn't you tell me? I swallowed. Tell you what? He blinked, breath shaking, and held the phone up. The screen displayed a page from an old newspaper archive, blurred and yellowed. Headline bold enough to slice through the room. Local man dies in factory collapse, survived by newly married wife. Evelyn Marsh. My maiden name. My first marriage. And Dylan knew I had been married before. But not that my husband died violently. Not that I had left that town and never looked back. He stared at me as though trying to reconcile the woman who raised him with the woman in that old article. You never told me I had a different father, he breathed. The air around us thickened. This wasn't a conversation for a ballroom filled with champagne flutes and wedding photos. Come outside, I said quietly. No, he whispered, shaking his head. I need the truth here. Now. Behind him, Isabella watched us with clenched hands, cheeks drained of color. Charles stood beside her, unreadable. Slowly, I lowered my voice. You do not have a different father. Dylan's eyes narrowed. Then who is Michael Marsh? My first husband, I replied. He died before you were born. That's why I changed my name. But you never told me, Dylan whispered. Never once. I wanted to reach out and hold him, but he stepped back. I wasn't hiding him from you, I said. I was hiding the world that came after he died. He stared, wounded and confused. Which world? The one that tried to decide my life for me. The one that buried me with him. I changed my name because people stopped seeing me, they saw tragedy instead. For a moment, he looked like the child he once was, wide-eyed, believing everything I said. Then his expression hardened. And you really think I didn't deserve to know that? Before I could answer, Isabella slipped gently between us, not defending me, not attacking, trying to hold the moment steady. "Dylan," she murmured, voice low, "maybe talk somewhere else." "No," his voice cracked. "I'm not doing secrets anymore." The orchestra slowed into a softer song, but the tension in the room built thicker. Drawing glances. I saw cameras tilt, conversations hush. I stepped closer. "Dylan, your childhood wasn't a lie. It wasn't a cover story. You just grew up without the burden of my past sitting on your shoulders." "Then why do I feel like you're a stranger?" he asked. His voice shook enough to break something inside me. "Because you're overwhelmed," I said. "And because this family, this environment, sees information as power." He ran a hand through his hair, overwhelmed, breathing fast. "I hate that I had to find out like this." "I know." He looked at the phone again, scrolling. His eyes widened. "There's more." Before I could ask, Charles appeared beside him, smooth, calm, utterly controlled. "I see you've discovered her previous identity," he said, eyes sliding to mine. Dylan stiffened. "You knew." Charles didn't break eye contact with me. "I knew the moment I asked her maiden name yesterday." Dylan whispered, "What are you talking about?" Charles turned to him slowly. Evelyn Marsh was financially connected to a private investment trust that shut down. Under unusual circumstances. Records show sealed documents. Restricted statements. I stared straight back at him. "You've dug enough for one dinner, Charles." He smiled thinly. "I don't dig. I confirm." Dylan's breath grew ragged. "So there's more?" he asked me, voice cracking. Isabella slowly stepped beside her husband, threading her fingers through his hand. Grounding him. "Dylan," she whispered, "your mother doesn't have to explain every page of her life. Today." He shook his head, whispering, "I don't know what to believe anymore." That sentence hit harder than anything so far. I exhaled slowly. "I will tell you everything," I said softly. "But not here. And not surrounded by strangers who want to use my past against you." His shoulders sagged. "Why does it feel like everyone here knows more about my life than I do?" He didn't wait for an answer. He walked away, disappearing through the side doors into the cold air outside. Isabella hesitated, then followed him, leaving me standing under the chandelier's warm glow while the room whispered around my silhouette. I steadied myself against a table. My heart hurt, physically hurt, but my face remained neutral. Then Charles leaned closer and whispered, "Secrets age like wine, Evelyn. Sweet at first, poison later." I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because I could feel movement behind me. Someone approaching through the crowd, footsteps slow, purposeful. I turned, and the last person I expected to see at my son's wedding stood there staring at me, eyes full of history I had buried. My former sister-in-law, Michael Marsh's sister. A ghost from my first life. She didn't smile. She didn't blink. She just whispered one sentence, low enough for only me to hear. "You never told them how Michael really died, did you?" My fingers went ice cold. Because she wasn't asking a question. She was accusing me. And she had come prepared. Behind her coat, I saw the corner of a manila folder. And she looked like someone ready to open graves. For a moment, all I could hear was the sound of crystal glasses clinking behind us and the orchestra rehearsing a song meant for celebration. But nothing about this moment felt celebratory. Standing only feet away from the dance floor, I faced Jenna Marsh, my first husband's sister, unchanged by time in the places that mattered, sharp shoulders, sharper eyes, and a mouth that had always been too ready to bleed truth into silence. She didn't offer a hug, didn't ask how I'd been. She simply said, "We need to talk." I forced a smile for the watching guests. "Outside," I murmured. I led her through the hall, past white roses and candlelit tables, out to the side garden, where ivy curled around stone walls. The winter air bit at my skin, but it was quieter. Here, only the hum of wind and distant laughter. Jenna folded her arms. "You didn't expect to see me today." "No," I admitted. "I didn't." She stared at me long enough to unravel nerve from patience. When my brother died, you vanished. We buried an empty coffin, Evelyn. I flinched at the bitterness riding her voice. There was nothing left to bury, I said quietly. Maybe. She stepped closer. But there were answers left. Answers you never gave. I inhaled slowly. Why are you here? She reached inside her coat, pulled out the manila folder, and held it between us. To make sure your son knows who you really are. My heart stuttered. You don't know him, I said. But I know you, she replied. Better than anyone in this house. She wasn't angry, not wildly, not wildly. She was steady. That was worse. Before I could respond, footsteps approached, soft, hesitant. Isabella. Her arms were wrapped around herself as if she'd stepped into cold water. Is everything okay? She asked gently. Jenna studied her for a long second. You must be the bride. Isabella nodded, unsure whether to smile. Jenna extended the folder. This is your wedding gift.
That's not necessary, Isabella said. Today should be. Honest, Jenna interrupted. The tension stretched between them. I stepped between the folder and Isabella. Whatever you think is inside that envelope, hand it to me, not her. Jenna didn't move. This is about your son's marriage, she said. His future. His children someday. Deserves truth. So does she, I replied. Isabella swallowed. Maybe I shouldn't be here. No, Jenna said. You should. The garden felt suddenly smaller, heavy with too many pasts at war with the present. I took the folder from Jenna's hand, not snatching, not desperate, claiming it the way one claims ownership of their own history. The paper was cold. I recognized the weight even before I opened it. Inside lay 3 pages. The official accident report, the survivor testimonies, and a single line written in pencil in the margin. Circled twice. Explosion not structural. Internal sabotage suspected. My throat closed around air. Jenna watched my reaction carefully. You left town 3 weeks after the explosion, she whispered. You took insurance, money, and disappeared. I shook my head slowly. Not insurance. Severance. Your first husband died, Evelyn, she said, voice trembling now. He died at 25 under suspicious circumstances, and you just ran. She didn't know the full story. She didn't know what it cost to stay. The stares. The whispers. The pity that suffocated. Isabella looked between us. You never told Dylan any of this? No, I said. Her eyes softened, but fear lived underneath. You promised he was safe. And he is. Jenna let out a quiet, disbelieving laugh. Safe. Evelyn, if the explosion wasn't structural, if it was a targeted blast, then whoever caused it might still be alive. Someone benefited. Someone paid. The truth landed heavy. She didn't bring this to ruin me. She brought it to warn me. Before I could speak, the garden doors opened again. Dylan stood there, breath visible in the air, jaw tight, eyes rimmed red. He must have been listening from inside. You left out an entire marriage, he said quietly. A death. A disappearance. Mom, how many secrets are stitched into my last name? I froze. He had heard enough to be hurt, but not enough to understand. Isabella stepped toward him slowly, but Dylan shook his head. He wasn't angry at her. He was drowning in the realization that the woman who raised him had a life before him. That didn't include him. I don't know who you are, he whispered. That sentence pierced deeper than any accusation. Jenna closed her eyes. Even she felt the wound. I said softly. I was 22 when Michael died. I wasn't prepared for motherhood, grief, and rebuilding all at once. I made mistakes. That's not a mistake, Dylan said. That's erasure. He turned away, pressing his sleeve to his face. I had never seen him cry like that, not in a long time. I wanted to hold him, but he stepped away from my reach. After a long silence, Jenna whispered to me, I didn't come here to destroy you, Evelyn. I came because something about Michael's death never stopped haunting me. And now seeing this wedding, this family, it felt wrong not to say it. The guilt in her voice was raw. I believed her. But belief didn't dull the agony in my son's gaze. Isabella murmured, We have to protect Dylan. Jenna nodded. And to do that, he needs the truth you both do. The wind cut across the garden, sharp and final. The wedding behind us kept spinning, music, laughter, speeches, while everything important fell apart in the shadows. I tightened my grip on the folder. Inside these pages, the first cracks of a buried world were showing. Something told me they weren't the last. As Jenna turned to leave, she paused by the double doors and spoke. Without looking back. You think this ends with Michael's death? Evelyn, his name wasn't. The only one in the rubble. She stared into the mansion. At the Westbrook family portraits. At Isabella. At Charles. And whispered. Your new in-laws were on that factory's board. Then she walked inside, leaving the cold air full of ghosts. And my son staring at a wedding family who might have helped kill his father. The Westbrook mansion thinned out as evening deepened. Guests faded into hallways. Music softened. And the night air took on that exhausted hush that follows celebration. Dylan hadn't spoken since Jenna's last accusation. He sat inside the reception hall, with his hands clasped together, shoulders tense, staring at the floor as though trying to unsee the world. Isabella sat beside him, silently rubbing slow circles across his back. Every few minutes, he wiped at his eyes, pretending to fix his hair. I stood in the corridor outside, watching my son through the glass doors, afraid to approach, afraid not to. The living room to my left opened into an enormous portrait chamber, paintings across centuries lining tall oak walls. I walked in. Something about silence was safer than breathing the same air as suspicion. The portraits were haunting, each generation staring down in oil and varnish. And there, hanging near the center, was Charles Westbrook as a young man standing beside a plaque that listed the founding investors of one of the largest textile factories in the region. My chest tightened. Jenna's words returned. Your new in-laws were on that factory's board. Michael died in a textile factory collapse. I stepped closer. The names were small, etched in gold paint. Charles Westbrook, Associate Sir. Timothy Westbrook, shareholder. Isabella's father and uncle. 2 signatures tied to the place Michael worked. My pulse stumbled. Behind me, a voice broke the hush. You're staring at old ghosts. Charles stood near the doorway, hands behind his back. I didn't turn. I wasn't expecting to see your name here. Why? He asked. Successful men invest in many places. That factory collapsed, I whispered. His jaw tightened just once. A tragedy. It killed my husband. I didn't know him, he said calmly. The casual tone almost made my skin crawl. You knew that factory, I said. Your brother did too. Charles finally stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. I see your former sister-in-law has been busy, he murmured. Jenna was always emotional, dramatic. She enjoys creating villains where there are none. I turned to face him. You were on the board at the time of the collapse. I was an investor, he corrected. Not a foreman. Not an engineer. But you profited, I said. He paused. Yes. Cold honesty. Sharp blade. That place had safety warnings months before the explosion. I said quietly. You didn't know that, he replied. Someone told me. He almost smiled. Rumor is a poor architect, Evelyn. The building fell because old structures fail. But the report didn't name structural failure. He raised an eyebrow. You read the report? I didn't answer. He already knew. Charles took a step closer, lowering his voice. If you are suggesting my family caused your husband's death, be careful. That kind of accusation can destroy lives. I've already lived one destroyed life. He inhaled slowly, as if disappointed rather than threatened. You're letting Jenna's and documents whisper fear into your ear. You're forgetting the world you stand in. Our families are woven together now. Not if I pull the thread loose. He studied me for a long time. You won't, he said softly. How do you know? Because doing so would shatter your son. He walked past me to stare at his own portrait, at the younger man behind a painted future. Dylan needs stability, he continued. Not conspiracy. Jenna is troubled and grief makes people imagine enemies. This is a wedding day, not a crime scene. It became a crime scene the moment Truth walked into the room, I replied. His gaze flicked toward the hallway glass where Dylan sat motionless beside Isabella. You want to ruin her life too? Charles asked. Your son loves her. She loves him. Whatever happened decades ago has nothing to do with them. Pain twisted something fragile inside me. He added quietly, walk away from the past, Evelyn. It can't be resurrected without burying your son alive. Beneath it. He turned and left. I stood alone, staring up at the portrait, a younger Charles Westbrook smiling with the confidence of a man who never expected consequences. Footsteps approached. Dylan entered the room slowly. I saw you leave, he said. Mom, what did Jenna mean? Did Dad really die in a place connected to Isabella's family? There was no way to soften the truth. Yes, I whispered. His eyes closed. Pain pulsed across his face. He walked to the portrait, reading the plaque, his breathing uneven. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I didn't know until years after, I said. By the time I pieced it together, the Westbrooks were untouchable. I had you to protect. And now you're grown. He sank into a chair and covered his face. I feel like I've walked into a marriage built on the bones of my own father. The sentence cut the air into splinters. I don't want to hurt Isabella, I said gently. But she's hurting because of you, Dylan whispered. Not because of me, I corrected. Because of Truth. He didn't respond. Instead, he stared back at the portrait, at the name beneath it. What if this family killed Dad? His voice broke. And what if I married into them anyway? Silence swallowed the room. I couldn't tell him what he wanted. Certainty, relief, a villain to point at. I didn't have it. Behind that portrait hung decades of corporate power and sealed history. The truth wasn't loud. It was buried. And buried things don't die. They wait. As Dylan stood, shaking, a faint sound echoed from deeper in the portrait room, paper sliding against wood. We turned. One of the frames, an older portrait near the back, hung crooked, now shifted by some unseen movement. Behind it, hidden beneath the wallpaper, glinted the corner of a metal file drawer, buried inside the Westbrook mansion. Behind a portrait of their ancestors. Dylan whispered, wide-eyed. Mom, what the hell is inside that wall? The portrait room had emptied of footsteps and voices long ago, leaving only us and the hush of old paint and older secrets. Dylan stood frozen, staring at the crooked frame. He hadn't spoken since noticing it, his breath shallow, eyes wide, body tense-like someone standing on thin ice. You saw that move too, right? He asked. Yes, I said. He ran a hand through his hair, shaky laugh escaping him. Please tell me this is a normal house settling sound. It isn't. Silence pressed against us. Somewhere down the corridor, laughter from the remaining wedding guests drifted faintly, a world still spinning while ours was stopping. Dylan stepped closer to the crooked painting, hesitating. Should we touch it? No, I said. Not yet. He gave me a look that bordered between fear and frustration. We can't pretend it isn't there. Before answering, I listened, to the walls, the breathing of the old house, the way the cold air crawled between the portraits. Something about this place felt wrong, not in a dramatic sense. No cinematic thunder, no trembling chandeliers, just a stillness that felt watched. Then Isabella entered. She looked exhausted, mascara faintly smudged, bouquet abandoned somewhere. Along the night, her eyes moved between the crooked portrait and Dylan's expression. What happened? She whispered. Dylan pointed. There's something behind the wall. Isabella stepped closer, frowning. That portrait hasn't moved in years. How do you know? Dylan asked. I grew up here, she answered simply. We used to play hide and seek in this room. We knew every creak. I watched her eyes trace the edges of the painting, confusion shifting into realization. That frame is bolted. It shouldn't tilt. Then why did it? Dylan asked. Isabella swallowed. The house is old. We get drafts. Earth shifts. You're both raw right now. Maybe you saw what you wanted to see. Her voice was gentle, not dismissive, trying to protect him from himself. But Dylan shook his head. Something moved. She looked at me next, searching my reaction. You believe him? I trust what I saw. Isabella sighed, rubbing her forehead. This wedding day has become a novel. Dylan's anger flared. You think I'm making this up? She stepped closer. No. I think you're overwhelmed. Today you found out your mother had another life, another husband. You found out my family invested in that factory. Your brain is trying to connect every dot. The reasonable calm in her voice made him wince. He whispered, So you think I'm losing it? No, she said quietly. I think you're hurting. He stared at the wall again, jaw clenched. I walked forward, placing my fingertips gently against one corner of the portrait. Cold. Metal. Dust. Slight looseness, real, not imagined. There's a panel back here, I murmured. Both Dylan and Isabella fell silent. You're sure? Isabella whispered. Yes. Dylan came beside me, brushing his palm along the frame, fingers finding the same looseness. He didn't speak, just nodded once as if confirming something private. Behind us a floorboard creaked. We turned sharply. Charles Westbrook stood in the doorway. He looked like a man fighting an irritation he didn't want to show. This room is off limits tonight, he said. Dylan didn't step aside. Why? Charles smiled without warmth. Because it is full of valuable paintings. And I really don't want my new son-in-law prying them off the walls. Dylan didn't blink. There's something behind that panel. Charles lifted one brow. You're tired. Isabella moved in front of Dylan slightly, not against him, but between him and the rising tension. Dad, she said, why is that painting loose? Charles didn't look at her. There is nothing behind that. I stepped closer to him. You answered too quickly. His jaw flexed. Sometimes, he said, you people forget where you are standing. The room chilled. Dylan took one slow step toward him. My father died in a factory you invested in. Now I find something hidden in your house, and you want me to ignore it. Charles's voice lowered. I want you to think, not react. And I want answers, Dylan whispered. Charles exhaled, frustrated. You want the truth? The truth is that Wall holds archives about shareholders and corporate records. Nothing more. Show us, Dylan demanded. No. Isabella blinked. Why? Her father turned to her, eyes sharp. Because marriage does not give strangers the right to invade our past. Something in Dylan snapped. I'm not a stranger, he said. I'm your daughter's husband. And that, Charles replied softly, was your first mistake. Isabella inhaled sharply as if struck. Dylan whispered, You regret this marriage already. Charles didn't deny it. My son's face changed, not angry, not broken, something deeper. His voice shook. When he spoke, If you won't show me what's behind that panel, I'll look myself. He took one step toward the wall. Charles stepped forward instantly. No, you will not. Tension thickened. Two men staring each other down, one built by privilege, one built by loss. Before Dylan could respond, Isabella gripped his arm. Not tonight, she murmured. Please. Not on our wedding night. His body went still. She was right. Fighting the wall tonight would destroy everything. Dylan nodded slowly. I still locked on the portrait. Tomorrow, he whispered. I'm coming back tomorrow. Charles watched us leave with a stare that did not blink. As Dylan walked out of the portrait room, he whispered to me. I can feel it. This house is lying. I didn't correct him. Because I felt it too. Hours later, when the mansion had gone quiet and every guest was gone, a faint metallic click echoed through that same portrait room. And the crooked frame swung open by itself. A shadowed figure reached inside the hidden compartment and pulled out a single dust-covered envelope. The name handwritten across it froze the air. Evelyn Marsh, do not open. Dawn broke over the Westbrook estate like a quiet apology, gray light leaking through the mansion windows, illuminating yesterday's spilled champagne, wilted flowers and chairs left crooked after the last guest shuffled out. The wedding was over. But nothing about it felt finished. I sat at the small round kitchen table, far from the grand dining area, with a glass of water and a headache that pulsed behind my eyes. Dylan hadn't slept at all. I knew by the silence of his footsteps above my room, and the way the plumbing hummed at 3 in the morning. At 6, he came downstairs slowly, dressed not as a groom who had woken next to his wife, but as a man bracing himself to face a stranger's home. "You ready?" he asked. I nodded. There was nothing left to wait for. We didn't wake Isabella. Not yet. Her loyalty lived between two worlds, and today's questions belonged to Dylan and me alone. We made our way to the portrait room. The hallway leading there felt different in morning light, grooves in the wood panels visible now, dust motes floating, portraits staring back without party noise to soften them. The crooked frame still hung open. Not halfway, not slightly tilted, wide open, like a door someone had left after rifling through the wall. Dylan froze. "You didn't open that last night?" he whispered. "No." We stepped closer. The wallpaper behind the frame had been cut years ago. The rectangle in the wall exposed a metal cabinet sunk between studs, hidden behind decades of paint, plaster, and family heritage. Only a few people would have known it existed. Inside the cabinet lay nothing now, just dust lining the shelves, the faint impression of where papers once sat. Only one thing remained, set perfectly at the front edge. A cream-colored envelope. My name inked across it in the handwriting I never expected to see again. Evelyn Marsh. Not Westbrook. Not Cooper. Not anything else. My first name, my first identity. Dylan's voice dropped. "That's Dad's handwriting?" My knees went weak. "Yes," I breathed. "It is." He reached for the envelope. "No," I whispered, grabbing his wrist. "We don't know what's inside. We don't know its purpose. If Charles finds us, we have more right to this than he does." He slipped his wrist free gently, not angrily, and took the envelope from the cabinet. It felt heavier than paper should. Not physically, emotionally. We sat in the middle of the portrait room, floor cold beneath us, envelope between us. Like an artifact. "Open it," he said. My fingers trembled as I slid them beneath the sealed edge. Inside were 4 items. A small photograph. A letter folded twice. A grainy photocopy of a board ledger. And a single business card. Dylan took the photograph first. It showed Michael alive, smiling. Younger than I remembered him right before he died. He stood in front of the factory where he worked. The building beams hunched behind him. But something else was in the frame. A man shaking Michael's hand. Dylan lifted the picture, brought it into the light, and then looked at me with horror. "Mom, is that Charles?" It was. A younger Charles Westbrook stood in that photograph beside my husband. Cold moved through my bones. Dylan whispered. "Why would he have this hidden?" "Because he never wanted anyone to see it," I answered. He set the photo down like a weapon. Next came the board ledger, names, payments, ownership percentages. And at the bottom, handwritten in Michael's ink, 10% shares not accounted, trace internal theft. My pulse raced. Michael had been investigating them, maybe even confronting them, right before he died. Dylan shook his head. "This is motive. This is real motive." "No assumptions yet," I warned. He stared at me, wounded. "Why are you protecting them?" "Because there are truths that ruin without proving." He looked at the last item. The business card. A lawyer's name. Local. Dated years before the collapse. On the back, in Michael's handwriting. "If something happens to me, give this to Evelyn." Dylan pressed his palm to his forehead. "Oh God." I unfolded the letter next. Michael's handwriting bled across the page, shaky, rushed, not knowing it would outlive him. "Evelyn, I've uncovered something dangerous. The factory books aren't right. Westbrook money isn't where they claim it is. If anything happens to me, don't fight them. Protect our child. Walk away. I love you, Michael." My breath left me in one long exhale. Dylan whispered he knew. "Yes," I said, voice breaking. He knew something was coming. "Mom," Dylan breathed. "This explains why you ran." Tears blurred my vision. "Yes." He closed his eyes, shoulders shaking. "I should have known. I should have trusted you." I wrapped my arms around him, holding my son as he cried into my shoulder for the first time since he was 14. We stayed like that for a long moment, letting grief and relief braid together. Then footsteps approached. Slow. Measured. Certain. Isabella stood at the doorway, eyes wide. I saw the wall open, she whispered. Dylan rose to his feet. Bella, my father knew your family. She blinked rapidly. Recognition, fear, instinct fighting logic. My dad. Yes. She stared at the photograph, covering her mouth. My father never told me that. That doesn't mean it isn't true, Dylan replied. She stepped further into the room, voice shaking. We need to show him. No, I said quickly. Dylan and Isabella turned to me at the same time. Why not? Dylan asked. Because showing him means revealing we found the wall, the envelope, everything. I whispered. Charles will destroy this evidence before you take a second breath. Silence. Isabella swallowed. He won't hurt us. Dylan shook his head slowly. Isabella, you're still thinking like a daughter. He turned toward me. Mom, what do we do now? For the first time since the wedding began, I had an answer. We leave this house, I said. Right now. Before we could move, the portrait room lights shut off. One by one. An electric click. Then darkness swallowing paint, faces, air. A voice drifted from the doorway. Calm, low, unmistakable. No one leaves. Charles Westbrook stepped forward, eyes glimmering in shadow. And he wasn't alone. 2 uniformed estate security stood behind him, blocking the exit. His gaze fell on the envelope in my hand. You should not have opened that. He smiled. Hard and sharp. Now we finish this properly.